hub for all spaceport activities. The spaceport's director, much of the Space Center's management team, and several hundred contractor personnel work in this 4-story building. This administrative environment is called the industrial area. This project, we're all prepared for launch here. Many of the payloads which are carried by the Space Shuttle, including the European-built Space Lab, are assembled and checked out in this building. There are living quarters on the 3rd floor, which are used by the astronauts when working or training at the center.
That is the flight crew training building. You'll be getting off the bus here for a brief presentation inside that structure. When you get off the bus, please take all your personal belongings with you. You'll not be getting back on this bus again. When you come out of the building, board the first bus in line. There'll be a bus.
The next place is the equipment to get off the floor. Well, I direct your attention to the right, near the ceiling, where you can see that screen.
You have entered a NASA spaceport facility which played a vital role in America's Apollo missions to the moon. You are in the flight crew training building, where the men of Apollo rehearsed every mission to the moon from liftoff to splashdown. Before leaving Earth, the Apollo crews worked in this room, practicing every aspect of what they'd be doing on their odyssey in space. Since Earth began, gravity has ruled our existence. Yet in this century alone, life and space technologies have broken the bonds of gravity to throw open a doorway to the moon. The 3-day flights to the moon were made by 9 Apollo crews aboard Apollo Command Service Module. The Command Service Module on display here is identical to those used on all lunar missions. This is actual flight hardware, real equipment, which could have been flown to the moon. The cone-shaped front-end section is the command module. It provided living and working space for a 3-man crew during their half-million-mile round trip. The Apollo crew worked in comfortable clothing, moving freely within the spaceship. The service module is just behind the cone-shaped command module. It contained the life support systems, electrical, communications, and propulsion. It carried the engine and fuel for the return trip to Earth. After the Apollo spaceship achieved orbit above the moon, the lunar module was used by 2 of the crew to descend to the surface. The lunar module and scientific equipment displayed in this room are actual flight hardware. The lunar module is just as you'd see it on the moon. The lower half of the module is the descent stage. Its engine was used to control the landing on the moon. That gold-colored foil around the lower section is mylar. It's a tough insulation against daytime heat that would boil water instantly. The upper half of the lunar module is the ascent stage, containing the crew compartment and liftoff engine. This small compartment was home for our lunar explorers for up to 5 days while they lived and worked on the moon. The lever on the side of the lunar module could never support the weight of a fully spacesuited astronaut on Earth, but in lunar gravity, a 200-pound Earthman would only weigh a little over 30 pounds. Neil Armstrong was the first to use the lunar module ladder on the first moon landing, July 20th, 1969.
That's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
Each crew of astronauts set up scientific equipment around their lunar base camp. The instruments measured moonquakes, temperature variations, and cosmic particles hitting the moon. Scientific equipment at each base camp was powered by a nuclear electric generator. Data was relayed to Earth for years before the equipment was turned off from Earth. It can be turned on again whenever more information is needed. The large umbrella-shaped antenna acted as a transmitting and receiving relay station between mission control on Earth and men at work on the lunar surface. In order to work on the moon, each astronaut was outfitted in a heavy spacesuit with life support systems in his backpack. Without that suit, a man could never survive the vacuum of space, deadly solar radiation, and temperatures in hundreds of degrees. Moving about in heavy spacesuits was restricted, but the lower lunar gravity was helpful. At the right of the moon base exhibit, a lunar rover vehicle is being deployed. Lunar rover vehicles were used by spring Apollo crews to drive over the moon's surface. With battery-powered four-wheel drive, the rover allowed the astronauts to travel several miles from their base camp. Top speed was about 9 miles an hour.
When he hits the crater that starts bouncing is when he gets his roof to sail. Man, you are really bouncing. He's got about 2 wheels on the ground. It's a big rooster tail on all 4 wheels. And as he turns, he skids the back end to break loose just like on snow. Man, I'll tell you, you've never seen a driver like this.
The rover also carried the astronauts to the mountains of the moon and to the edge of deep craters. The astronauts collected rock and soil samples from many areas of the moon for study back on Earth. 3 slightly used rovers are still on the moon, just waiting for someone to arrive with fresh batteries.
Okay, Houston, as I stand out here in the wonders of the unknown, so I realize there's a fundamental truth to our nature. Man must explore, and this is exploration at its greatest.
At the end of each exploration, the crew would blast off in the upper half of the lunar module, the ascent stage. The lower half served as their launch platform. American astronauts went to the moon in peace for all mankind, and they will return. However, the next lunar mission will be flown by a new generation of astronauts and spaceships. The men of Apollo are looking to today's young men and women and the teenagers of America to carry out the next flight to the moon. The challenge is yours. Today's youth must prepare to plan that voyage, build the spaceships, design lunar bases, and again travel to the moon in peace for all mankind.
Until the closing years of the United States' second century, the moon was far beyond man's grasp. It was as untouchable, as unassailable as it had been at the beginning of recorded time. The Apollo 7 V was the ingenious instrument which would bridge the void, standing 36 stories tall and with a fiery breath producing 180 million horsepower. This massive machine was the product of combined imaginations, talents, and skills of a determined people. It was created as a response to a call to yield to no nation our leadership in science, technology, and the ability to sail this new ocean of space.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man
400,000 Americans were directly involved in Apollo. They labored in industrial complexes, universities, and NASA centers, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Canadian border. It was to the Kennedy Space Center that the nation's rivers of technology would flow, to meet and emerge, to expose their cargo to a test by fire. It is here that creation ends. It is here that this dormant machine, 15 million separate parts, is given birth for a brief but purposeful life, to carry men where no man has gone before. An Apollo Saturn launch countdown for a lunar mission is underway. You are in flight containing the control and monitoring equipment for the most powerful space vehicle ever launched. The countdown is holding T-minus 3 minutes and 15 seconds. 3 hours ago, the astronaut crew left their quarters and moved to the launch pad. They are now inside the spacecraft, waiting for the countdown to begin. The display board on your right indicates that NASA's worldwide tracking network is ready for launch. The network includes ground stations, tracking ships, and especially instrumented aircraft. The terminal count sequence board on your left shows the present status of the launch vehicle. When the countdown is resumed, this board will display the final 3 minutes and 7 seconds of launch activity. The test supervisor is pulling his test conductor. He should be about ready to pick up the count.
Attention all personnel, the countdown clock will start on my mark at T-minus 3 minutes and 15 seconds. 3, 2, 1, mark. T-minus 3 minutes and 15 seconds and counting. That's through 10.
This is Apollo 7 launch control. We are both for Apollo 11. Firing command coming in now. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. We are go with all elements of the mission at this time.
This is the launch operations manager. The launch team wishing you good luck and Godspeed. Thank you very much. I'll see you.
And the final checks between the several key members of the crew here in the control center and the astronauts. Launch operations manager Paul Valley wish the crew on the launch team's behalf good luck and Godspeed. Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. We're still all on Apollo 11 at this time. The vehicle is starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor our stratosphere. 2 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting. The target for the Apollo 11 astronauts, the moon at liftoff, will be at a distance of 218,096 miles away. We just passed the 2-minute mark in the countdown, T-minus 1 minute, 54 seconds, and counting. Our status board indicates that the oxidizer tanks in the second and third stages now have pressurized. We continue to build up pressure in all 3 stages here at the last minute to prepare for liftoff. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds on the Apollo mission. The flight to land the first men on the moon. All indications coming in to the control center at this time indicate we're a go. 1 minute, 25 seconds and counting. Our status board indicates the third stage completely pressurized. 80-second mark has not been passed. We'll go on full internal power at the 50-second mark in the countdown. Guidance system goes on entering at 17 seconds. We're up to the ignition sequence of 8.9 seconds. We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. No Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. leave from power, moving on to the air at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go to Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9.
Breaking the shackles of Earth's gravity, the mother planet was left behind, and the moon loomed up ahead. On July 20, 1969, man became a creature of another world. He had begun the exploration of a solar system. 5 more crews would follow as Apollo astronauts explored this alien world. Apollo's achievements represent a peak in mankind's technological development. But Apollo also brought us a new realization of the smallness and fragility of our Earth as a harbor of life for the entire human race. Technology acquired from the space program has been pressed into service in virtually every aspect of man's life on Earth. In clearing the way for bold new steps into space to benefit all mankind, Apollo was the end of the beginning, and proud prologue to a glorious future.
For your safety and security, stay with your group. You are not permitted to go outside of the immediate tour.
Among them are several families of the American bald eagle, the U.S. national bird. Nearly 300 families of wood stork, the only true North American stork, and more than 20 species of ducks. During the winter months, the waterfowl population numbers close to 100,000. Tops is the Kennedy Space Center's logistics facility, where some 190,000 shuttle spare parts are categorized and stored by one of the world's largest automated robotics systems. The smaller hangar-like building to the left of the VAB is the Orbiter Processing Facility. There are 2 identical processing bays inside this 96-foot tall structure. After a space flight, the Space Shuttle Orbiter is brought into one of these bays and ready for its next mission. Any remaining fuel is drained, and all fuel lines, pumps, and engines are cleaned and carefully checked. Cargo and experiment packages from the previous flight are removed here, and new ones for an upcoming mission are installed. Some payloads, however, are put in the orbiter when it is on the launch pad. After the orbiter has completed its checkout in the Orbiter Processing Facility, it is essentially ready to fly. The spaceship is then towed to the VAB, where it is attached to its booster set and external tank. 1939. Behind the black vertical louvers at the top of the building are the firing rooms, where launch preparation is monitored and controlled by a network of computers. Government and contractor personnel inside represent all facets of the space shuttle and its payloads during the final checkout and launch. Moves the mobile launch platform and the space shuttle over this roadway to the launch pad. The crawler way, which is as wide as an 8-lane highway, was originally designed to support the combined weight of the transporter, mobile launcher, Saturn V rocket, and Apollo spacecraft, about 18 million pounds. In order to support this incredible amount of weight, 6 feet of earth was removed and replaced with layers of limestone and hydraulic fill, which was compacted. Asphalt was then poured, and a final roadbed of river rock was added to minimize friction for the crawler as it journeys more than 3 miles to the launch pad.
Left would be Pad B, where the Space Shuttle Orbiter Columbia was recently launched. We'll be stopping out in between the 2 launching pads for a camera stop. We'll be stopping ahead near one of the crawler transporters. There are 2 of these. They'll alternate the use of them, built by Marion Power Shuttle Company, Marion, Ohio.
Pads and 2 buildings that you see to the distant right are where the Titan rockets are prepared and launched. It was here that the Viking mission to Mars and the Voyager planetary missions began. The tall structure on the horizon to the front left of the bus is Launch Pad A, used for most of the .154 feet long and almost 28 feet in diameter. It's used to supply liquid hydrogen and oxygen to the main engines of Launch Pad B. Notice the incline to the surface of the pad. This represents a 5% incline, which is negotiated by the huge crawler transporter as it makes its way toward the surface, carrying the space shuttle. The pad's surface is 42 feet above the bottom of the flame trench. The service towers on the pad provide access to the shuttle and have connections for fuel, electric power, and communications. Because of the large number of lightning strikes in this part of Florida, a white fiberglass lightning mast stands sentry atop the tower, rising 347 feet above the surface. A tower adjacent to the pad contains 300,000 gallons of water, used during launches for cooling and sound suppression.
This Pad B of Complex 39 ahead. This pad was completed November of '85 for the Challenger's launch in January of '86. May be able to see the cable leading out to the left of the pad area. It's a method of egress for the astronauts in case of emergency. Get into a cage, slide down that cable into bunkers.
Y ahí van a lanzar 20 no sé si derecho o si
On the other side, it's also covered by a service structure, which acts as a workshop for it. If we were driving on the other side, you wouldn't be able to see it. We'll be stopping ahead for a camera stop. We care to get outside the bus, walk up the concrete steps, top of a mound area. We'll be overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Returning to this bus 16, you can see the two white solid rocket boosters this side. Flame trench on this side, 42 feet in depth, where gallons of water are poured over two flame deflectors.
For your safety and security, stay with your group. You are not permitted to go outside of the immediate tour stop area.
Over here taking the picture.
Also located in the flame trench is a steel flame deflector, which distributes the heat and flame away from the pad. The small mounds inside the fenced area with white stanchion are used to mount cameras, motion picture, still, and television that are used to record the pre-launch and launch activities of the space shuttle. These cameras are remotely controlled since no one is permitted in this vicinity around launch time. All personnel are moved back as a storage area for these and other exotic fuels. The entire area is fenced and carefully guarded. Specialists. The orbiter can remain in space for up to 30 days, but most missions last about a week. The shuttle is used for a variety of purposes. In fact, many different kinds of jobs can be accomplished on a single flight. Satellites can be taken to low Earth orbit, then checked out to be sure everything is working properly before being placed into final higher orbit. Satellites that malfunction can be retrieved and repaired in orbit or returned to the Earth. Space Lab, a versatile, reusable manned laboratory, is carried in the cargo bay of the orbiter.
Be stopping ahead. The last camera stop at the Saturn V space vehicle, the moon rocket, be able to get out fast. These doors are 456 feet in height. Take about 45 minutes to open. All these space shuttle orbiters assembled in upright or vertical position on a launching platform inside the high bay area. Preparation for launch.
Ahead, on the left, are the press facilities used by the news media to report launches from Complex 39. Up to 3,000 reporters and photographers from around the world have been here to cover an Apollo or Space Shuttle launch. The press site is 3.5 miles from the launch pads. It is the closest point from which a shuttle launch.
Stopping ahead of the Saturn V space vehicle. If you please stay on the inside of the fenced area.
¿Cómo? ¿Te vas caminando hasta Miami? ¿Sabes cuántas millas hay de aquí a Miami?
Usted sea cierto
Termina
que
en
sea. David.
Son 15 días nomás que te gastas.
¿Qué eso es?
Sí, no es mucho. 24 horas. Pero como tú no vas a caminar 24 horas sino 8, porque pues el resto descansa, entonces tienes que multiplicar por 3. 3 por 15 son 45 días.
La llaman en la
O sea que si empiezas ahorita, ya. 45 días son el 30 de agosto.
Ajá.
30 de agosto caminando
Abuelita,
8 horas al día.
La única subvención que tiene.
Pero no de eso.
pasa ya.
You guys go ahead of me, but I just want to. I wonder how they get from here down.
It's probably on that.
No, with that Challenger's model that I have, that one the top opens up here and there's a big arm. Oh yeah, right there, Mike. You're right. See, there's a little like hole right down there.
Sort of like being on the front seat of your car.
Oh, so the window. Yeah. I didn't see you sitting before. It's like a big airplane. Cute little buttons to push.
This is where they fly. You see them? You see them there? There's a job.
Along with tracking ships, provide support to NASA, the Air Force, Navy, and commercially launched craft. The range monitors the progress of land or submarine-launched vehicles and relays important data about the craft's performance. In the 1960s, a channel was dredged in the river for the passage of barges carrying huge rocket stages and equipment to the Apollo complexes north of here. Many modern rocket boosters are now flown into the Air Force Station aboard transport planes such as the C-5 Galaxy. These planes land on a 10,000-foot concrete runway known as the skid strip. The channel is now used primarily for the transport of the shuttle's giant external fuel tank and for the ships which recover the shuttle's solid rocket boosters. The pair of specially built ships recover the boosters from the Atlantic, tow them through Port Canaveral, and deliver them to the booster refurbishment facility, which is the last hangar ahead and to your right. Frequently, the ships can be seen berthed at their station.
If you look across the water to the right, you can see the two specially equipped recovery ships. Very soon, just prior to launch, those two ships will position themselves about 150 miles offshore. About 2 minutes and 7 seconds into the shuttle launch, these two solid rocket boosters separate and parachute into the ocean where these ships pick them up and bring them back to that large hangar, which is hangar AF. Take them apart, clean them, send them back to the manufacturer in Utah, which is Morton Viacom, where they're refilled with solid propellant and eventually reused.
The government agencies and private contractors which rely upon the range also have facilities at Station 1. The hangars to the left house Navy, Air Force, and NASA operations. To the right are the offices of the Air Force Type 4 program and contractor personnel, the 6555th Aerospace Test Group, and Martin Marietta Titan Support personnel. Drifter Center, a mission control for expendable vehicles. It also serves as the central telemetry facility for expendable craft. Hangar S is the original Project Mercury hangar and is now used for shuttle payloads. The large building on the left is the Air Force 6555th Aerospace Test Group headquarters building. This team manages Air Force operations at the expendable booster launch facilities and is also responsible for the monitoring of all commercial launch activities at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. To the right is Hangar AF, home of the shuttle booster recovery ships, and is where NASA disassembles and cleans the shuttle's rocket boosters after launch. The casings are taken apart, cleaned, and returned to the manufacturer, who will reload the boosters with solid propellant for use. Scott Carpenter, Walter Schirra, and Gordon Cooper. In 1965, following the first manned flight of the Gemini program, the mission control function was transferred to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
It's
T plus 10 minutes, and the status boards in the Mission Control Center indicate that all spacecraft systems are go in this flight of Gemini 3, the first manned Gemini mission. Imagine, if you will, that this is March 23rd, 1965, only 10 minutes after a Titan II rocket lifted off from Launch Complex 19. In the Gemini 3 spacecraft are the late Virgil Gus Grissom and John Young. On the world map, the position of Gemini 3 is shown over the Atlantic Ocean near Bermuda, and the green circle with a blinking light indicates that the Bermuda tracking station is now in contact with the spacecraft. The pulsating red dot to the right of the Gemini 3 position marks the spot where the spacecraft would land if the mission had to be cut short at this time. And shown also are the ground tracks that Gemini 3 will follow on its scheduled 3 orbits. Tracking stations are shown by circles. Green circles indicate that all systems at a station are now working properly. Yellow circles, like the one at Guaymas, Mexico, indicate there's a minor problem, expected to be corrected shortly. Red circles, like the Canton Island station in the Pacific, indicate a tracking station problem with no estimate when it will be corrected. Dotted line circles on the map indicate ships, which are now filling gaps in the land-based tracking network. The status board to the left of the map shows us that all is going well on board Gemini 3. The Cape and Bermuda tracking stations report temperature, pressures, fuel supply, and other readings are normal. And above the map are clocks and counters. The Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT clock, is the standard time reference used on all space missions. Greenwich time is 5 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. The orbit counter shows Gemini 3 is now in its first orbit, and further to the right is a clock counting the minutes since liftoff. And along the right wall of the control room are plot boards. They display the flight path, acceleration, and velocity of the Gemini Titan launch vehicle. Except for some minor changes, the consoles and the desks are as they were when this was Mission Control Center in the Mercury and Gemini programs. Each desk is marked with the title of the person who occupied it then. These men kept track of the information about the flight, and if problems arose, they had the knowledge and experience to recommend a possible solution. On the screen to the right of the world map, mission rules were projected during each phase of the flight. And now you'll see some dramatic pictures of a typical Gemini launch. The scenes were made during Gemini 11. The 3-day flight of astronauts Charles Conrad and Richard Gordon that began on September 12, 1966.
We heard them repeatedly on television and radio during both the Mercury and the Gemini manned space missions. All 6 Mercury flights, from countdown to recovery, were controlled from here. In the Gemini program, this was the control room for the launch countdown. What was it like? Hectic, calm, tedious, exciting, all of these. Let's look in on the dual countdown of the Gemini Titan, which is to be launched from Complex 19, and its target vehicle, the Atlas Agena, which is about to be launched from Complex 14.
Minus 30 seconds. Mark. Launch commit lights are correct at this time. Status check. Pressurization. Go. Missile power. Go. Hydraulics. Go. Re-entry vehicle. Go. Camera ready switch to ready. The ready light is on. Ignition.
launching of 2 Gemini astronauts.
Attention all countdown monitors, continue to use flight pages. Verify item 5. Flight controls item 6. Verify item 6. And safety. Go. SRO, go. STC. Spacecraft is go. Martin Company's go. 65-55. The Air Force is go. Roger that.
So that concludes the program here, folks. You may now return.
You turn them off, they all just go back to zero. This is what we call the firing room of the blockhouse. This is where it all starts. And I'm leaning against the console here. That's connected to the gantry out here, the launch tower, which we have a Redstone rocket in right now. And we launched the first rocket in space in January the 31st, 1958, from right here, called Explorer 1. We have a backup in the next room. I'll show it to you. It was 80 inches long, 6 inches in diameter, and weighed 30 pounds. And it took one man to launch it. He had 3 switches. He had a test switch, and he had an ignition switch, and he had a go switch. And that's all. And it takes 360 men and women today at similar consoles to launch the Shuttle. And it took almost 600 to launch Apollo when we were going toward the moon, going to the moon. The Explorer 1, when it was launched, on its ascent into space, it discovered the Van Allen radiation belt, which is a magnetic field around the Earth that's very vital to our communications efforts today. It had a mercury battery and a mercury transmitter. Mercury meaning that it was just like a dry cell. Once all the juice is used up, that's it. We didn't have the solar technology in '58 to be able to recharge the battery, but it sent back signals for about 4 months. And the rocket itself stayed in the space for about 12 years until it tumbled back into the atmosphere and burned up. And we had about 35 following launches from this console here, including the 4 primates, Abel, Baker, Eno, and Ham. These are chimpanzees and monkeys. We didn't have enough thrust to put Alan Shepard, the first astronaut, into space at that time, so we used these 8, 9, 10-pound chimpanzees, because they brought back what we needed to know anyway, the vitals, like your doctor asked me, heartbeat, pressure, and temperatures and all that. I'm going pretty fast, so stop me anytime. I can answer any questions. If I can't, the other guy's smarter than I am. He'll be able to.
I don't remember. Was it Explorer 1 who discovered that the Earth is slightly bulged in the south,
Yes.
the southern hemisphere?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
The Earth is slightly pear-shaped.
That's well, egg-shaped or pear-shaped, right? Yeah.
And because it was going around the Earth, it wasn't going where they thought it would be.
That's correct.
It was Explorer 1.
Explorer 1, yes. That was one. Told us a lot of things about space that we weren't sure that was whether it was a supposition or whether it was a fact.
When the Russians sent up their side, did they learn anything? Or
They wouldn't tell us.
They just spin their balls
Yeah,
around.
see, ours was about 4 months. Explorer 1 followed their first launch by about 4 months. And we really got excited then. When they sent Sputnik in October of '57, everybody here started working overtime in order to get Explorer in space.
It seems like theirs just goes beep beep, and ours gets the scientific data. And
well, we don't really know. I'm sure somebody knows now.
Still secret. Still kind of secret.
It was a space race. There's no question about it for a long time.
Was everyone involved at that time in the Air Force? It was purely an Air Force operation?
No. The General Medeiros was an Army general, Army 2-star general that really started the space program. And the two scientists, well, one was Werner von Braun, the famous German scientist, that ran from Hitler toward the end of the war. We caught up to him and brought him and about 55 members of his staff back here. And he worked right here. He's been in here many, many times. And another scientist, a local, called Dr. Bob Goddard, he was a solid fuel specialist. But we think of those two gentlemen as really the fathers of the space program. But we call him Dr. Medeiros. He was an Army 2-star. He went to Washington and fought for the money and all that, and got the space program going. And then when he retired, he went over to Winter Park, and I guess he became a Episcopalian priest until he just died a few years ago. He had a brilliant career. He was no infantryman, but he was very brilliant. So get the program started. But this is the real embryo here. This is the beginning of everything started right here. There were so many things that were unknown to us. Like, for instance, we've got 9 feet of reinforced concrete over here. The walls are 3 feet thick. The floor is about 6. The doors are 3 inches of solid steel. Because we didn't know what was going to happen out here. And the launch pad had to be so close, because everything was done by electrical wire. Over the cables, and over the top here, down underground, out to the launch pad. And we couldn't get any farther away than where we are now at that time, because the signal would have been distorted. But of course, now we can launch a rocket from here. It sits on the North Pole, it's South Pole. But we didn't have the technology at that time.
When was this blockhouse retired from active use? When was this blockhouse retired from active use?
That's 61. Yes. We've been kind of in the business off and on since that time. It's all done by volunteers. We're all, most all, it's all retired military that spend their time up here. Otherwise, the Air Force says they cannot afford to pay a staff. They do maintain all the facilities real well for us, and we are an Air Force Space Foundation. What little money we do make, we get to keep. SNP doesn't take it. These scales, they look like answering scale. A little large, don't they? They actually weighed the propellants, the fuels that went on the rocketry. which was normally was alcohol and liquid oxygen, but it was weighed by pound with those crude steel. But it worked. Other questions? As you know, in this area here, we're in complex 5 and 6 and 26. You'll go south here when you leave. There's no gantry there, no launch tower any longer. That's where Alan Shepard was launched into space on May the 5th, 1961, followed by Gus Grissom in July, and then the first man that orbited was in January the next year, and I don't remember his name, but I think he's a senator out there in Ohio.
It's gonna rain on my head, but I'm getting this shot anyway. The very last missile down at the end of this field, it's a Redstone rocket, and it's positioned at the exact location where Alan Shepard launched from in 1961. And you can see there's a Mercury capsule on the top. And if I recall correctly, that's the blockhouse that was used to launch Shepard's mission. The tour doesn't actually stop there, it just drives by, which is why I'm filming this now. You can note how they're so close together, it's only about 150 yards. Today the launch control for the space shuttle is more than 3 miles away from the launch pad because of the danger.
Topped off by the red Mercury space capsule. Now that is where Alan Shepard made this country's first manned spaceflight. It was on the 5th of May, 1961, a 15-minute suborbital flight, followed up a couple of months later by the late Virgil Gus Grissom.
The silos are now the storage site for the Space Shuttle Challenger debris and